Hello everyone, this is the first devlog I will be sharing with you for my game HellSages. This is my very first game and I started working on it about a year ago. As you can guess from the name of my channel, my brother is also helps me from time to time with the development of the game. Recently I met outsider who is helping me with level design. In return I support his project with coding. Unfortunately, I wasn't very active in the past few months, but now I am back at full speed. Next month, I will prepare another devlog where I will explain all the mechanics, structure and story of the game. But in this video, we will only talk about the main character, design, code and scene setup. For now, all you need to know is the game is 2D platform. In fact, in some aspect it will be very special project, but we'll talk about those in future devlog. My plan in this game is to have 7 playable hero characters. 2 of them are completely finished. The one you see in the screen is the third character, Bob. Bob is a firefighter and his design still needs some adjustment. However, his scene and code are ready. The characters we will examine today are the first and the second characters, Raven and Endora. By the way, on my Patreon page, which I created to support my journey in game development, I share enemy codes and scenes with members. Even if you are not a member, you can buy the codes and scenes I prepared for the game in the shop section. I also put Ravens and Endoras as separate files on sale. If you are curious about their design, you can check out the link at the top right to watch the video. Once the design is completed, Bob's separate file will also be available in my Patreon shop. If you like this design or want to support me, I would love to see you on my Patreon page. Now, let's move on to the main topic of this video, the main character scene and code. If you haven't come across a state machine structure before, I recommend watching the main character preparation video from the link on the right. Because here, I won't be explaining every single line of code, and much of it may look unfamiliar. Lastly, the codes and scene setups of these characters will also be available for sale on my Patreon page. Here, we first have a sprite 2D. We define the necessary animation where collision shapes are defined. Using 2 of them have some advantages, but it is not mandatory. Now we have the animation player and a label used for debugging. We are using 3 different raycast groups. 2 of them handle what we call forgiveness functions. This helps bad players like me feels like better players. The ones for the head handle jump corner correction, preventing the player from getting stuck in the narrow spaces. Jump buffer right and left detects when you reach a platform and start the falling state. Jump buffer allows the jump input to be recognized if the player press jump just before touching the ground. This is the state structure where the real magic happens. If you are not familiar with this, I strongly recommend watching the video at right side. There you can see the preparation video for a character I created for a Udemy project. Here you see the attack areas. I will explain in the video why I set it up this way. It's a recently added structure and solves a lot of problems at once. We will look at what it does in detail soon. First, we will go over the important main script. Together with the character's own script, we will talk about 6 scripts in total. First, let's look at the finite state machine script. This handles transitioning from one state to another. Thanks to the functions we will create, we can check whether a given script has a specific variable or not. Now, you see the base code of all stated. After assigning this in a state, we extend it. This way, we can access the defined variables and it forms the basis for a very neat and expandable system. It creates a layer between codes. Here is the global script. First, I keep the characters' basic variables because I want them to be upgradable. The characters also can access them easily. Similarly, it is more useful for me to keep ultimate related values here. If you only have one character and don't plan on upgrading those values, you can keep them directly in your character script. I track regen values and the character's position and whether they have the weapon in hand. For example, by tracking whether the weapon is in hand, I can handle the necessary operation when entering a new level. With the functions I use here, I can collect points for the ultimate, use take damage and heal functions, I also track players' locations so enemies can find them more easily. Finally, I have a function here that lets me pause and resume the game whenever I want. Now, let's check the sword script. This is the last big change I added to the character system. Honestly, it works very well and solves many problems at once. First, it detects when the character turns and flips the attack areas. Previously, you had to do all of these manually. It adjusts the damage of each hit and amount of the ultimate charge they give. It can also add short pauses to certain hits to make them more dramatic. Additionally, it calculates whether a hit will be critical by checking critical hit chance and the damage from global script. To make this work, all I have to do is assign the script to the attack area I want and connect the on-body entered signal to the code. This script makes my hits appear on screen. Thanks to this, if the hit is critical, I can assign a different color. Now, let's move to our main character script. The first two variables here for jump head correction. Then we have fall damage value, some ultimate variables, our on-ready variables include sprite 2D, finite state machine, all the raycasts and the collision shapes of the attack areas. Now, let's look at the remaining variables. For air kick, I defined a knockback. Then, we have the new forgiveness feature, coyote time variables. These could have been defined with raycast as well, but I found managing them with timers more efficient. There are also variables for direction, is dying, and checkpoint position. Then I define basic variables necessary for movement. These track the current state I am in or the action I am trying to perform. Now let's look at the physics process function. If I'm not on the ground, I apply gravity, but to prevent constant acceleration during falling, I defined a maximum value. When I land, I reset some air-related variables. I check the ultimate state. If I am not charging the ultimate, I proceed with remaining processes. Here we have the jumping code, and if I want, I can release the jump early. Similarly, if I'm on the ground, the coyote time variables are resets. Also, during some attacks, direction changes shouldn't happen. We will handle this in some states by converting it into a function and calling it in animation. There are a lot more needs to be done here, but doing everything in this function would make it messy, so I prepared functions outside and call them here. First, we encounter the jump head correction function. Thanks to this, when the player gets into a narrow space, it will be easier to get out without getting stuck. Here is the function, allows us to use coyote time. It is basically act like we are still on the ground for a small time if we press the jump button late. You see two functions here for ultimate. That's because I designed it so that if player charges the ultimate longer, it deals more damage. They can charge up to 5 seconds and increase the damage. Of course, this comes with its own risk. The states with general function ensures the necessary variables start changing for state transition. There are 5 things to pay attention. Of course, some actions change the variables, but that's not the main point. Maybe some of you noticed when writing functions for ultimate, we directly commanded to state change, but here we don't do that. When designing both the characters and smart enemies, the most important thing is to define a priority order and decide which state can transition from which. For example, I can always transition to her, and it is not under my control. It has to interrupt whatever I am doing. In this case, I command this high priority state directly from main code, while I'll handle lower priority ones under my control within the state structure. We will look at the state scripts again, but for now, a quick peek. I coded this structure to enable transition from specific state to specific state. For example, I can transition to attack 1 from many states, but I can only transition to attack 2 from attack 1. Another thing we need to point is if the player chooses a faster character or upgrades speed and it goes above 185, then the running animation changes. Now let's return to our script. The variables we see here mostly situational variables and only one can be true at a time. So if one is true, I set the others to false. With the reset attacks function, instead of resetting each variable one by one after every attack, I reset them all together. All state that include attacks call this function. This way, the process can restart with the new attack command. Here, I call this function so my attack areas are not active when I'm not attacking. Otherwise, just moving near enemies could cause them damage. When direction changes, sprite 2D flips. The air kick function is something I added to give character a different vibe. I thought it would be nice if I caused a small knockback after the air kick. Here we have the take damage function. It differs from standard ones in two ways. First, if I'm in the knockdown state, I don't take damage. This is something I added to partially protect the player. Also, the actual damage taken is calculated in global script where defense is also factored in. Now we see basic heal, hurt, knockdown and die functions, and I don't think there is much to discuss here. Here we have the set checkpoint, fall damage and respawn at checkpoint function. Finally, you see a signal function I defined for the kick. As you can see, the signal calls the necessary function and activates the knockback force. Now let's go and check the state scripts together. In the video I told you several times that if you don't know the state structure, you should watch the main character preparation video. But even in this video, I tried to explain as much as I could. As you may notice, all the codes you see here are extended from state 1.0 script. That means they provide everything from that script plus the new code we write. Let's see what we have. First, when we enter a state, we need to be able to exit from it. For this, we define a transition variable. Then, with the ready function, if we need to run some code or access some variables in the main character, we do it here. Then we check if the player has the sword on hand and start the related animation. If the animation is not a loop, we wait for it to finish and then run the function needed to transition to a new state. If it's a loop animation, we can transition to new state as soon as it starts if conditions are met. Now, let's talk about animations. I'm sure most of you have used animation player in some way. I personally prefer to track animations by FPS. There is no special reason, but what I pay close attention, analyzing movements carefully and adjust FPS value. Having all animations at the same FPS makes the game very static. Another feature I regularly use here is enabling and disabling attack area collision shapes. Additionally, we can call any functions we want from scripts at specific points. I must say this is incredibly useful. To be honest, when I first started, I couldn't even imagine building such a system. But step by step, it all became a reality. So if you also dream of making a game, make sure you fight for it. You won't believe the results you can achieve. Also, if you like to support me on this journey, you can subscribe to my channel. If you like what you saw, I recommend checking out my Patreon page. You don't have to buy anything, but if you become a member or purchase something, it would help me a lot. The scenes and scripts of both characters you saw in this video will be on my Patreon store page. They won't be cheap and I apologize for that. I hope I was able to provide something useful. All take care.